Good afternoon, all, and thank you again for joining us for today's edition of NiBAP's webinar. And we're glad to have Dr. Onoja to be the spokesperson for today. And another interesting thing is that today again is the International, or is it World Nature Conservation Day? And it's just so a nice coincidence that we'll be discussing about conservation of nature. And in that vein, we'll be focusing on the KBAs and how the KBAs will be can work together with the bird atlas. So for today, we'll just go straight ahead and start. We'll have Dr. Onoja, the Director of Technical Programs Department, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, and he will be giving us his talk. So right away, I will give the floor to Dr. Onoja. So you're welcome. You can have the floor now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I will share my screen and then we'll take it up from there. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. To be invited to talk about and bird atlas and how they can work together. This is have to create the areas and how we can log folks who are activating data tags or the other. So we talk about all the experts. So this applies very nicely to what we are going to talk about today. You already know about, but I will need to build that to where we are going to. So we all know that biodiversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems. Those of us who deal with terrestrial tags, most times we forget about the marine, and it's been shown that marine even has more diversity, and the aquatic system, marine and the aquatic system has more diversity even than land. So it's quite important that we continue to carry them along. And the diversity includes within species, between species, and of ecosystem. And it's very important. The ecosystem part is very important, which we hardly emphasize sometimes. So one of the things that continues to face us is the fact that our biodiversity is in crisis. We are losing it at an alarming rate. It's been shown that at this Anthropocene era, let me put it that way, we've lost most of our biodiversity as compared to all the era that has happened before now. That it was shown that about 100 or 200 years ago, when you put the biodiversity on one scale and you put man on the other scale, it will tip the biodiversity and the wildlife will tip the scale upwards. But these days, the scale has turned around. Man and its domestic animals are way more higher than the biodiversity that we have. So if you put man together and the cows, the goats, the sheep that we have, they're way much higher than the biodiversity that we have, which is very, very alarming. Sometimes we think that the things that happen around us happen automatically, or the food that we have around us are manufactured. Biodiversity has a very critical role to play, even in the sustenance of humans. I continue to tell people as much as I have the opportunity that when we talk about environmental conservation, In the real sense of it, we are not actually saying environmental conservation, because the environment will always take care of itself. The environment can conserve itself. However, while the environment conserves itself, humans will be at the receiving end, because we will not be able to mutate quickly enough to adapt to how the environment will occur. For instance, what we are seeing in Lagos, the coastal erosion is happening, is actually the environment adapting. But while the environment is adapting and causing the coastal erosion, homes are being lost, livelihood are being lost, human lives as well are being lost. So the environment will always take care of ourselves. But when we talk about environmental conservation, we're actually conserving the environment so the environment will take care of us. It is our life support program, and we'll continue to call on people so that when we talk about conserving biodiversity, we're actually conserving biodiversity for ourselves. It's actually for selfish reasons, for humans. That is why we continue to do that. So it's a crisis on its own right, and it has significant impact on our well-being through ecosystem service loss. Because of the ecosystem that the environment provides, it continues to play a very important role for us. If someone says our life support system that we have. For instance, during the World Pangolin Day, we're trying to highlight the fact that a pangolin consumes protects about 70 football fields of forest by eating over 70 million insects and termites annually. So you can imagine what will happen if that number of termites are unleashed to any community. Definitely, the termites will ransack that community, and that is what the ecosystem service that one pangolin does for humans. Imagine what they do together, and this we cannot quantify. We cannot quantify. Right now, we are pushing for eco capital accounting so that it will be added to the GDP. So politicians will understand that these things that are standing as if they are useless, they are actually very important to our well-being, so that we'll know how we conduct and how we treat them. So that eventually, after we've so-called diversified and we've so-called done a lot of advancements, we'll build mansions, we'll build industries, we'll be able to stay and enjoy whatever thing that we have done. Because if we do all of those things at the detriment of the environment will come and wipe us. Mother Nature can be brutal in as much as she is caring. She can be very brutal as well if we don't handle her well. So in terms of the extinction crisis or extinction risk that we have, IUCN has based that they are IUCN has based that on the declining population, geographic concentration, and all small populations. Some biodiversity or some components of biodiversity based on their population size, based on their biology, based on their geography, or based on the population, their declining population, they are classified into different categories according to IUCN Red List. Some of them may not be because of any major threats to them, but because of their biology, because of their population, or because of where they are. For instance, the ones that are concentrated on an island, they need to be looked at, because if anything happens to that island, then they'll be wiped off completely. They are going to lose them. So we have species extinction risks based on these three criteria. We have population reduction, which most likely has to do with anthropogenic activities, restricted geographic range that goes on the island, small population size, and also declining, very small and restricted population, and quantitative analysis. All of these are fed into a threshold calculation that produces the red list categorization that we have, which also I want to encourage that we also expose ourselves to the IUCN red list so that we'll be able to understand these things as well. And then there are three major threatened categories that we have: critically endangered, and vulnerable. These three are called the threatened category. Well, you still have the near threatened, the least concerned, the one that is data deficient, the one that is not even evaluated, and many species fall under not evaluated, many species. And that is where we cannot say a place is a KBA without evaluating the species that trigger that site as a KBA. So we have a lot of work to do. And that is where the data that we are collecting as bird atlasers, as citizen scientists, is quite very important, with a bit of very wonderful with this. The speed, the risk of extinction of ecosystem collapse. Just the way species can go into extinction, ecosystems also can disappear and can collapse because they will not be able to perform their function as they should. For instance, by the time we destroy a forest, the forest will not be able to perform the function, number one, as habitat of other biodiversity. Secondly, as a reservoir for some of the drugs that we have. Thirdly, as a carbon sink, and so on. So there are many functions that it does as a flood regulator, as a erosion regulator, and so on. So there are many things that that particular ecosystem can do. So also it is with our coral reefs, our fishing industry. If that coral reef collapses, or our mangrove ecosystem, if it collapses, it poses danger to all of the livelihoods of the people who are around there. So ecosystem collapse can be characterized as the loss of native species that make up that ecosystems, and species that perform key ecological roles that are no longer able to maintain those functions, especially in the fact that we know that these things occur in a chain, for those of us who know food chain, and then the food web. So by the time you interrupt one of that chain, it makes the whole system collapse. I used to give this illustration about somebody who went to a village and realized that the village has so many frogs and the person likes frogs. And funnily, the frogs is only the left leg that the person likes. So he gave this community so much money and they went and harvested the frogs. They harvested so much frogs in that environment that they made so much money that year. However, that community happens to be a rice farming community. Then what happens that a year later, they realized that their rice, they had failed harvest because their rice just dried up. They noticed that the rice didn't yield. So after some research, it was realized that there was an upsurge in the pests that attacks the rice. And the pests that attack the rice and insects happen to have been controlled by the frogs that they sold out. So you can see that if they made so much money 1 year by selling their frogs, but 2-3 years down the line, they lost revenue from their mainstay of the community's economy. So you can see that to that extent, we will say that they kind of collapsed their ecosystem, because that frog, which is the flagship species, the key flagship species, they removed it from there, which was performing a very important role in controlling the pest of that rice. They removed it from the system, and then the insects didn't have any regulator, and then they went over and above, and then what they will feed on definitely is the rice. The rice was available, and then the community had a failed harvest. So that's just a simple illustration of what can happen by the time we disrupt the ecosystem and an ecosystem collapse. We humans will be at the receiving end. So just like we have the threatened category of the species, ecosystem also have the threatened category. And it is by geographic distribution, changes in distribution, environmental degradation, especially caused by humans, and disruption of biotic processes or interaction. I also have that the ecosystem will collapse. Just it is comparable to the species going into extinction. Critically endangered ecosystem, and vulnerable ecosystem, and so on. So also it is with the ecosystem. So in terms of habitat destruction, there's urgent need for us to address that. By safeguarding habitats is one of the most effective conservation strategies available, because habitat is the home of biodiversity. So the biodiversity that we have, they kind of live in a home, and that home is the habitat that we have. So whatever strategies that we have to conserve biodiversity, it must be targeted towards it. Will contribute significantly to global persistence of biodiversity, because the scarcity of funds and the scarcity of resources, both human and material, will not be able to conserve all areas. It's good for us to know hotspots so that we'll be able to know which areas to give more attention to. So areas of importance for biodiversity as recognized by the Convention of Biological Diversity, the Aichi 11 target, which in the global biodiversity framework that is being negotiated now, which hopefully we'll be able to see the agreement in the CBD COP that comes up in Montreal, in Canada, sometimes in November, December. We'll be able to see this area is still, this part, Aichi target has been modified into target 3 in the global biodiversity framework. It's called the areas of particular importance for biodiversity must be conserved, Aichi 11 targets. So the importance of biodiversity, the areas of importance of biodiversity, we have them at various scales. So different approaches, for instance, those of us who are here, we are very much familiar with important bird and biodiversity area, started by BirdLife International. We have others, important plant areas. We have zero extinction sites. We have important amphibian areas. So all of these things, and a lot of different organizations are doing different things just to push their own objective in the taxa they take interest in. And in all of this, what they have seen is that it is making a lot of, they couldn't just push the advocacy for it. It was becoming very difficult because, oh, let's conserve this area because it's important for plants. Oh, let's conserve this area because it's important for insects. Oh, let's conserve this area because it's important for amphibians. Oh, let's conserve this area because it's important for plants. You know, BirdLife started thinking about that thing because when they started important bird areas, they now realized that this area, when they conserve them for birds, they saw that other biodiversity are also protected. So eventually they expanded it to important bird and biodiversity area. But other conservation practitioners also were thinking about it. And then it was becoming confusing for lawmakers. And then there was a need for a global standard. That was when they came together in the World Congress of IUCN in 2004 in Bangkok, that they should, and most of these organizations are all IUCN members. So they said they should recognize the need to unify a framework, to have a framework unifying all of these things together. So when they agreed as a resolution in the 2004 World Conservation Congress, WCC, in Bangkok in 2004, they went to work. So they had stakeholder engagement, technical papers, framing workshops, and they went on and on the various stages, very painstakingly. They were going on and doing the global consultations until they came up with the KBA standards. They came up with the KBA standards, and the KBA standards is a standard that is available on the KBA website, biodiversityareas.org. You can get all of those standards from there. All the materials are available online for you to also explore. So they had a unifying framework, bringing all of these things together, so that when you go to a lawmaker, you want to talk about an area, a habitat to conserve for biodiversity. You are not talking about insects alone. You are not talking about birds alone. You are not talking about amphibians alone. You are not talking about plants alone. But once you say key biodiversity area, it covers all of this place. So it brings like an umbrella, as you can see the sign, that is the symbol of the key biodiversity area, an umbrella, bringing all of these approaches together so that we have one voice, one mouth, and one resource pool, so that we'll be able to conserve biodiversity. So that when we're talking about key biodiversity area, when it comes to IBAs, is conserving other biodiversity as well. And this is the first time we are all coming together to be able to have that unified. So the KBA standard was launched at 2016 Congress. You could see how long it took them from 2004, all the consultation and everything, until it was adopted in Hawaii 2016. And it was led by 13 nature conservation organizations committed to identifying, mapping, monitoring, and conserving key biodiversity areas. BirdLife International, IUCN, American Bird Conservancy, Alliance for Amphibians, Conservation International, Critical Ecosystem Partnership, Conserve, Global, and so on, all of them until WWF. 13 of them came together, and they are able to make sure that they agree on this to move it forward. So What are key biodiversity areas? Key biodiversity areas are sites contributing significantly to the global persistence of biodiversity. They are sites contributing significantly. Remember when we talked earlier that we will not be able to conserve all sites. So we have to look at the sites that are contributing to the persistence of global biodiversity. That's very important, that we have sites, and then we have different criteria and categories that we need to go through for the are identified using criteria designed to capture elements of biodiversity across genetic, species, and ecosystem levels. So we talk about species, we're talking about genetic, we're talking about ecosystems, because an ecosystem will also trigger all of these criteria, all of them, in that global KBA standards, they are all listed there, and we'll be able to, it's available for an online, and we'll be able to talk about them. So the criteria are applicable to marine, freshwater, terrestrial, and subterranean systems. So the definition of the sites: KBAs are sites with delineated boundaries. They must have delineated boundaries. The KBA standards define a site as a geographical area on land and or in water with defined boundaries that is actually or potentially manageable as a single unit. It's very important to have that manageable. And then in terms of area demanding species, that is like area demanding species, most globally threatened species depend on specific sites, but for some part of their life cycle. And most areas demanding species require a combination of conservation action at sites and at sea, or at sea or landscape scale. Few species do not regularly or predictably occur at any site in significant numbers. So in terms of climate change and environmental change, what is happening to the various sites that we have in terms of KBA in this context? They are identified based on the current distribution of biodiversity. And let's not forget about the categories that we saw, the IUCN categories that we saw, because that will play a major role in whatever we are doing going forward, in terms of seeing sites that contribute significantly to the persistence of global biodiversity. It's very important for us to remember the different categories based on the different categories of ecosystems, which category they fall under, or species, which IUCN threatened category they fall under. So sites that currently meet criteria and thresholds should be recognized as KBAs, even if threatened by climate change, etc. Sites that do not currently meet the criteria and threshold cannot be identified as KBAs based on predictable future. That is, if a site is going to be a potential KBA in future, but is not now a KBA, it will not be, it's not be termed a KBA, or it's not be designated a KBA. If a site currently meets a KBA standard, even though it's been threatened by habitat change or climate change or so on, it will still be recognized as KBA, because that kind of highlights the problem that that site is facing, and then the conservation actions that need to be placed in that. So in terms of KBAs and protected areas, in many cases, just like we have IBAs, KBAs are already well conserved. But most of these areas are conserved based on their status. For instance, IBAs are KBAs for birds. So there's a need for us to also go in those KBAs and look for more taxa. Apart from birds, what other taxa can trigger that KBA as KBA? For instance, you may have a place that is important for birds. You may go there and do a research on butterflies. You may go there and do a research on plants. You may go there and do a research on some other insects that will be able to trigger them, or amphibians, or salamanders, as the case may be. So you'll be able to use that. And the more you have more species triggering the site, the better is it for that species. Where additional management is required to secure the persistence of biodiversity at the site, there are many management options available, as I've mentioned. So in terms of conservation priorities, KBA are sites of global importance for the persistence of biodiversity, as we said. KBA should be taken into account in conservation priority setting, because now you already have all sites, all tags are under KBA. It's very easy for you to be able to advocate that the policymakers include KBAs as part of their conservation priorities, or whatever developmental thing they want to do, they will include KBAs to it. Now, where that comes in is if you had, for instance, IBAs, you had important plant areas, you have zero extinction site, it will be difficult to put all of those things in a policy document. But once you say key biodiversity areas, everything is covered. And conservation priority setting also uses additional information. For instance, the threats, the cost, the ecosystem services it provides, and the cultural value for that. And it follows the assess, plan, and act cycle in terms of conservation actions. And we'll continue to do the assessment, continue to plan, and then we'll continue to act. Now, the World Database for Key Biodiversity Area provides information on the location of key biodiversity area. Now, I'll start introducing where Bird Atlas comes in, because Bird Atlas has a huge potential to be able to help in all of this. And that is where I want to mention that the coordinators of Bird Atlas, I'm sure we talked about this in one of the workshops that we had. We talked briefly about it, because one of the things that we saw is that for a site to be able to be triggered as a KBA, we'll need not just a distribution map, we'll also need the abundance. The abundance of such species is very important. The distribution in terms of within the species, in terms of whether male or female or reproductive, what we call reproductive unit, is very important. So as you go out there collecting data, I know when we started the Bird Atlas, it was just recording, but I was glad to learn 2 weeks ago when I was in Jos that now it's been emphasized that the number should be included as well. And Bird Atlas actually has the place that you can impute the number you've seen, so that over time you'll be able to tell. I'm seeing the Bird Atlas to be a major tool for us, because KBAs will be eventually assessed after 8 to 12 years. So imagine that the Bird Atlas team has been collecting data from now to the next 8 years, and then you have distribution data. You have not just distribution data, you also have numbers. If possible, you have sexes. You have the numbers segregated into sexes. You can imagine the huge amount of data that you will have in 8 years in Nigeria. So that is one area I want to highlight for the Bird Atlas team. That you see that at the end of 8 years or 12 years, when we want to do assessment of our KBAs and the sites that you have been monitoring. Hello.
Yeah. Madam,
is someone saying something, please?
Preparation of all.
Hello, is someone calling my attention to something?
No, sir. Please, you can proceed.
Okay, yeah. So as I was saying, if you have this data, you'll be able to tell 8 years, 12 years time, you just pull out the Bird Atlas data, and you're able to tell us this is where these species occur. They occur in this KBA, they occur in that KBA, and these are the numbers. And they are able to trigger, they continue to trigger that site as a KBA. And that is where it comes in, very important. They are database. And eventually we'll find a way that where we can link both the world database of KBA and the database of Bird Atlas, so that we continue to work in synergy and provide that. So that's one area where the Bird Atlas data can be very important. I know Bird Atlas for now is also looking at birds, but is there a plan eventually where that Bird Atlas, the same energy, when we go out, just like now, everybody, if we are conserving a KBA, we are conserving it for all the species around us. Is there a way where we will be able to put it together so that the same effort that we use to be able to go out to get birds data, with that same effort, if we are using it to get other taxa as well, it will help us. Because now I know that birds has been relatively more studied in Nigeria, even worldwide, than other taxa. So whatever information we can get from other taxa, it will be very important as well. In fact, you'll be surprised that one insect or one butterfly or one salamander or one frog that you will find in a site is enough to be able to trigger that site as a KBA. And that is how it is. One species is enough to trigger a site as a KBA, as long as by the time you pass it through the KBA global standard, it meets the criteria, especially the threshold. For instance, if you find a site and you find a species that is critically endangered, and the population threshold of that site meets the global criteria for that site, you find out that that site will trigger that species alone, no matter how small or infinitesimal that species is, it will trigger that site as a KBA. And that is why it's very important. So going forward, is there a way where we can integrate other species in the bird atlas thing? So these are all thoughts that we should be having as we continue this discussion. So KBA data are being used in many different ways to influence conservation policy and sustainable development at the global, national, and local scales. It is very, in fact, we have what we call NiBAP, where corporate organizations will go into that place, they will zoom into it, where they want to develop, they will check, because it's NiBAP is a GIS web tool that you go, you check that site, you just key in your coordinates of the site you're interested in. It will show you if that site has a conservation area around there. So if you want to go in there, IF6 will not allow any financial organization or a financial institution to fund that project. And then people will just stay away from that project. And that is why it's good for all of us to come together so that we'll be able to make that happen. In terms of using information on the World Database or KBA, we use it to support national government setting conservation priorities, strategic expansion of protected area networks, national commitments to international environment agreements like the Sustainable Development Goals that we have. So we use that to be able to push government. Last week we had the Kigali, the African Parks Congress, where luckily the Minister of Environment was there, and we were able to meet some of our partners, so that we'll be able to see that these things that we are doing in Nigeria, we're not doing in isolation. We're doing it with collaboration with other partners internationally, because we are acting local, so that together we'll be able to have a global synergy of whatever is happening in our local environment. So in terms of the Nigerian situation, driving it home as I conclude, we have 27 legacy KBAs. These were IBAs. They were formerly known as IBAs. And we've done the validation that took place in March. And we brought different people who have worked in different areas to be able to get, we couldn't bring everybody, so we just took samples of people who will be able to do that. And about 15 sites have been validated. So legacy KBAs have moved from legacy KBAs to KBAs in Nigeria using the various forms that we have. There's a form that you have to fill and then see all the trigger species and put them through according to the various criteria that we have. And as I mentioned, the bird atlas comes in to be able to help. So we need data, as I talked about, not just the distribution, but both distribution and abundance, to be able to declare more sites as KBAs. And as bird atlas go out, there are some species that you will find in some places that are also important to us. And I'm going to, we said this during the last workshop, also now still repeating it. We don't have the global numbers of rock firefinch in the IUCN red list. So we need to bring up some of those things. If we have those numbers, and that is where this abundance is very important as well. When we have those numbers, some of these numbers will have to come from us. BirdLife International is the global red list authority when it comes to birds. Some other organizations do that for other taxa. So the data that we are gathering, let us continue to make it more robust, so that when we make it available, our country data will make it available to the BirdLife Secretariat. They will be able to use that also to update that. And we are pushing forward to be able to create, Dr. Stella Egbe and Dr. Ivan, they have been discussing species specialist group for Nigeria, which I'm sure many of us will be part of eventually. It's some of the things that we're trying to do to see what we can do. And the NiBAP presents that opportunity, especially with the citizen science component that NiBAP has been able to push, I'm quite impressed when I see, oh, the Arewa Atlas team are going out, the CESAT team that is Southeast, South, are going out in the Atlas and they're doing what they are doing and then making it happen with the coordination from Applauding. So it's something that is quite important, and we can all leverage on this to eventually make our data in country very robust so that we'll be able to, number one, protect our KBAs. Secondly, designate more sites as KBAs based on even sometimes the bird data. Some of them we think that we have known all the birds. Even we may be surprised a bird species that we've never recorded before may just pop up from somewhere, and we can get these things from the NiBAP. So you can see that NiBAP can help us to be able to even trigger some sites as KBA as well. And as I said earlier, if we can have a kind of component of other tags that are coming in, it would not be too much. I will not distract NiBAP from its set goal or set of objectives. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sure I've gone over my time, and I think I will stop here. A lot of things has to be said about KBAs, but I'm always available to talk more on that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Onoja, for this brilliant presentation. And before I say any other thing, please, the floor is open to all participants. We can ask our question directly by raising our hands, or you can just drop it in the chat box, then I will read it out to the presenter. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Okay. No questions?
Wow, was that much a boring speaker?
Good afternoon, Nancy.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shala.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Noja, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for reminding us of KBAs. all the training that we had a few years back.
Yes.
Just what you said, I think this issue of capturing other tags is important, because KBAs will not, it's not necessarily, it doesn't focus on a single taxa. The idea is to capture as many taxa as possible. And I think maybe a way out is for us to, usually when we go out for the Atlas groups, when we have the Atlas groups, one of the things perhaps we could do is to try to share the effort, so that while some persons are concentrating on birds, a few others, maybe just one or two, might just look out for other taxa that are also there. So, but that of course would largely depend on the leadership of NiBAP to facilitate. But I think that's a possible way of ensuring that the effort we are putting into the Bird Atlas also will count for other taxa.
Very well, I agree, absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Shola, for that addition. I saw 3 hands up, and now eventually all hands are down. So do we still have
still
more?
up.
Okay, so please.
I can see Longi, Joseph, and Elisha.
So please, Longi, you can go ahead and ask your question or any addition. Hello, Mr. Longi. Okay, if Longi is not there, please, can we have the next person, Elisha?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Onoja, for the presentation. I was still waiting to hear from you after the last presentation I did at Aplori about the biodiversity of Nganyaki. Well, I just have something to say concerning what you had said about the NiBAP data. Is it possible that KBA can also develop an app like that of the IA Naturalist or the ADU, so that people at different points in time can submit data? I don't know if it's possible.
Okay. So if I understand your question, actually, KBA, if you see KBA as the last resort, kind of. So IBAD, I Naturalist, and all of those things are tools towards triggering KBAs. So what these tools will do, why is it difficult to be able to do that with KBA? Because KBAs, we don't submit data to KBA. You use the data that you have to pass it through the criteria, the global standards, to trigger a site as KBA. For instance, where you are in Igayaki, if there are some species, for instance, if Igayaki was not the KBA, because Igayaki was one of our legacy KBAs, if Igayaki was not a KBA and you have some sites in Igayaki, all you need to do is to pass it through some different procedures, some different criteria that will be able to trigger that site as KBA based on the species you find. For instance, when you find a critically endangered plant, and 75% of that, the population of that plant is in Igayaki, that is automatically triggers the Igayaki as a KBA. So it's not for data to be sent to the KBA secretariat. No, it's for the data to be used to use that site to be able to pass through the global standards to see if that site will qualify as a KBA based on the species that you find. And especially these sites are usually we consider endangered species. And endangered species, as we saw in my presentation, we're talking about vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered. So these three are the ones that we normally use. I don't know if I help. And then your question about your biodiversity presentation, please come back to me again. That must have been a long time, and let's have more discussion on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Shola, I agree with you on the need to introduce that into the curriculum. We did what we did. We kind of experimented with that in Aplori. We did that 2-3 weeks ago in Aplori, where we taught the students the KBA standard, because this is just the introduction. We have up to about 12 modules that we normally go through to be able to take people through. So if anybody is interested in this, let's meet and then let's talk. We'll be able to make that happen. And the KBA, the way it is structured in Nigeria, the KBA has what we call the National Coordination Group. And the National Coordination Group have different members. Aplori is a member of that coordination group. NCF is the secretariat. So we have different professionals. I can see Ringim here. Ringim also is a member of that coordination group. So we all put together to be able to make different contributions to that group. And it is expanding gradually, the coordination group, as more people continue to know about it, and as we continue to increase the responsibilities.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. OJ. And there's this question from Mr. Longi. He's asking, do we have some aquatic KBAs in Nigeria?
Okay, yeah. So we call them, we have what we call freshwater KBAs. Freshwater KBAs. So we had 2 in Nigeria until the last workshop that we did. We are likely going to have 2 more. So we call them FWKBAs. So we have 2 freshwater KBAs. One is around River Ethiopia in Delta State. The other one is around Calabar area. So we have 2 of them. And then we had the professor who was there, a fish expert, also identified 2 other KBAs as well, which we are passing through the mills to officially name them as KBAs. So yeah, so we do have 2 KBAs.
Okay. So there's this question from Abdul Hamid. He said, for local research presentations, do we maintain all researches done in KBAs before the March declaration? Oh, still as IBAs, or regard them as KBAs even as data was taken before March 2024?
So the thing is that IBAs are still, BirdLife still kind of like their IBAs. So within the BirdLife family, they still consider IBAs as IBAs because it's very close to their heart. And in fact, BirdLife are the ones maintaining the KBA database anyway. So there's no much difference between the IBAs and the KBAs. So as it is now, if you are citing them now, you refer to them as KBAs. But if you are citing them before 2016, when it was agreed upon, you refer to them as IBAs.
Okay.
Yes, but it's still the same. It's still the same principle because, as I said, even before this KBA came about, BirdLife had already changed down to important bird and biodiversity areas.
Okay. All right. So I hope Abdul Hamid, your question has been answered.
Yes, thank you very much. It has been duly answered.
Okay. So we still have people with their hands up. So please, if your hand is up, you can go ahead and ask your question because I can't really see you individually. But then there's this question, but did all the IBAs eventually meet the KBA, the threshold for KBAs from Dr. Sam?
No, not all. For birds, not all met the KBA threshold for birds, but these sites also have the potential to trigger these sites as KBAs for other taxa. So that's why we're not just throwing them off because they are going to be our priority. Other taxa, that's why we want to encourage all others people to go in there and check for other taxa as well. It's very important. For instance, what we've done so far is for birds. What about the KBA? What can it trigger it for instance, for amphibian? What about for newts and different other taxa that we have?
Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, just to follow up quickly, sorry, please, for interrupting.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Onoja, for the presentation. So I asked that question also just to also find out if there is some place where people can go and see, you know, what has now been what has met the threshold that has now been considered a KBA, you know, so we can keep track of the sites as they become KBAs. Is there some place where people can check?
So it's a long process. So we have not updated even these sites yet because I'm giving you an inside information and put it that way because as the assistant regional focal point for KBAs for West Africa, because we've seen that it has met the threshold. So I've sent it to the regional focal point for Africa. He's going through it. So after it goes through, it has to go to the secretariat, and eventually the secretariat will be the ones to now formally declare it as a KBA and then update it on the list on our website. So what I can do is for us in Nigeria, I can dig up our own KBAs so that we'll be able to go to that place to see our current KBAs now. The only KBA in Nigeria that has been updated is the Adejamburu wetlands. And you will see how the criteria and the threshold that it met for it to be triggered as KBA.
Okay, so thank you, sir. Yeah. So Zainab, your hand is up. Please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Zainab. Okay, maybe before she comes up. Okay, go ahead.
Joseph Izang just sent in the chat, which is very important, that for now, because of other tags that we may not be able to get their numbers now, but if we have their distribution. Okay.
Okay, Zainab, go ahead, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Dr. Onoja. Thanks for the timely and enlightening presentation. We're currently working in my school on updating our curriculum for different programs here. And I saw a post that says we need to introduce this to curricula in school. So I was thinking that, do you have any like short-term or long-term plans for that? And how can we key into it? That's one. Two, is there a special like funding for people that are interested in helping to expand the list? Or it's just maybe if you do your own work, like you mentioned with NiBAP, and then you can update the data. Then I don't know if I missed this information. Where is the hosting site for the KBAs? If we're looking for information on it, where's the website that hosts the information on that? And finally, is there like a test that when you designate a place as a KBA, is there a monitoring process? You know, the IUCN has the red list, and of recently that they have the green list of species, or the green status of species rather. So is there something like that, or is there a plan? And then you said that there's a 12th module to become like more educated in terms of KBA. I am personally interested and would love to key into that. Thank you very much.
Okay. I just posted the KBA website that you can go in there and check. And also, I just posted the site for the conservation training. Just to answer your question there.
Okay.
So that training, conservation training, you can log in there and then go through it. It will help you also to prepare as you teach your students as well. So if you go to that site, the first one is the KBA website. The second one is the conservation training that is being run by TNC, the Nature Conservancy, which is a part of the KBA family, global partners.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. So Tunji, please, you have the floor. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Onoja.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Actually, my own question has to do with the threats that we face in getting all these data in the field. This morning, I was in my area in Ibadan. I was trying to get some data on beds. So I discovered that there are some miscreants around that area. And these are the challenges that we that are doing this work are facing. How can we tackle these challenges? Because at times you might be watching, what's it called, the birds, and you just see somebody running at your back. You know, these are the challenges. I don't know. How can we tackle this?
Yes. Don't mind me wearing this fine Ankara and things like that. So I'm also part of that we that you're talking about. I'm also a field person as well. Actually, it's especially now it has become very difficult to be able to collect data. In those days, what we used to do is that we hold our bed book or our bed guide very closely so that anyone that comes and we open it to them, they will see it. In fact, they themselves will start interacting with us and call us on serious people and things like that. But now it's becoming very difficult. They don't even come close. The threat is someone can even shoot you from afar. So it's for me and my staff, what I tell them is that if anywhere is not safe, we don't go there because you need to be alive to do any conservation work. So we try to, the security issue is really a major concern and we need to be circumspect in these times that we find ourselves. We are indeed in perilous times, I must tell you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So just be wise, please, as you move around.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Zainab, is your hand up again or you didn't put it down initially?
So if I will highlight what Joseph said, the first is, and then this one.
Yeah.
So it's good for us to, for the species, for the taxa that we don't know about. Luckily for us, we have apps now that can identify some of these uncommon taxas that we may not know. So when we stamp them and then upload them, somebody may see it and say that, oh yeah, this species is very rare. or is an endangered species or so, then focus will be on that species for us to be able to know more about it and so on. So it's very important for us to have their general distribution, and then if there's need, then we zero in into anyone that is of interest, so that we'll be able to get that done.
Okay. So thank you so much, sir. And if we don't have any more addition, or do we have more addition or question to ask Dr. Onoja? If we don't, if there are no more questions at this junction, I want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining today's call, and a special thank you to our presenter for creating time out of your tight schedule to make sure you give us this talk.
Yes, well done, Nancy. I must tell you that you were really on my tails for you to be able to get me to do that. Thanks. I think I'm glad I eventually obliged that. It's not because I didn't want to, but I had to squeeze this time to do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you so much. At least today we get to know that IBAs are the KBAs for birds, and conserving nature, the biodiversity in all. You know, we have like a selfish interest to it, but then we're doing it all for ourselves. So the more we go out there to conserve, the more we do good to ourselves. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Sure, of course, some of you were asking if we'll have the PDF available. Of course we will do. I know Dr. Onoja will be glad to share it with us, and NiBAP in turn will share it with any other person that is interested. All you need to do is to stay tuned to our Facebook page. So thank you so much again for joining. At this point, I will say have a good evening, and please do make our time to join us during the next month's webinar. Bye, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for finding time to attend.
Yeah, thank you for the lecture.
Yeah.